I worked as a social worker for 12 years out on the East Coast. Over that time, I met more broken people than I can count: abused children, battered women, individuals lost to mental illness, addiction, or just profoundly bad luck. You do your best to help them, to stay compassionate, but then you have to learn to shut it off when you go home. If you don't, it eats you alive. For the most part, I was good at that. I learned to draw boundaries, to leave the darkness at work. But 5 months before I finally quit and moved across the country, I met someone who shattered that barrier. Her name was Hattie McGovern. Hattie was a college student, barely into her 20s, and she'd been attacked the night before in a local park while walking home. When I met her, she was under observation at the hospital. Physically, her injuries were relatively minor, mostly abrasions and cuts on her scalp, but the things she said, and the way she said them, didn't add up. When we were alone, after I explained the services available to her, I asked if she felt ready to talk about what had happened. Her voice was quiet, trembling. She told me she'd been walking quickly through the park that night, running late to meet friends. It was supposed to be a quick stop home to shower and change. That's when she noticed a man, older, bald, pale, walking not beside her, but about 50 feet away, moving across the grass, stepping over hedges and curbs without breaking stride. His eyes were locked on her, his mouth stretched in a wide, unnatural smile. She said it looked like a skull was watching her. Understandably disturbed, she picked up her pace, but she didn't run. She compared it to being near a Baird panic. Don't show fear, just get away. She glanced ahead, hoping to spot someone else, but the path was empty. Then she looked back. The man was gone. In that split second of confusion, she felt a hand slam into her hair, yanking her down to the ground. The doctors tried to say it was shock or fear that had paralyzed her, but Hattie insisted that wasn't it. She said it was the thick, foul-smelling spit the man had launched onto her physique clung to her like glue, and after that, she couldn't move at all. Even when he reached into some hidden pocket and pulled out a straight razor, her body refused to respond. Her heart pounded wildly, but her limbs betrayed her. He never spoke. He just smiled that ghastly grin and began grabbing handfuls of her long blonde hair, sawing them off with the razor. I asked if it hurt. She gave a bitter, joyless laugh and told me, "Of course it did, but that wasn't the worst part. The pain didn't compare to the feeling of being violated off, having a part of herself stolen. That was what broke her." When he rolled her onto her stomach to cut the rest of her hair, she started to feel faint signs of life returning, tiny twitches in her fingers and toes. Not enough to fight or run yet, but enough to give her hope. She decided to wait for her strength to return, to bide her time. She wasn't passive, far from it. Every nerve in her was ready to strike if he raised the blade to her throat or reached for her clothes. But he never did. Instead, after he cut away the last of her hair, he scooped it into a pile beside her head and then walked away, just out of her line of sight. That's when she heard a horrible, wet, choking noise. It took everything she had to turn her head and see. The man was eating her hair, golden fistfuls of it, stuffing it into his mouth, chewing, choking, gasping, and swallowing. She said the sound alone was revolting, but watching it, that terrified her in a deeper, more primal way than anything else. Then, without warning, he let out a guttural groan and collapsed onto the grass. He twitched violently, like he was seizing her, maybe choking to death. She hoped it was the latter. With enormous effort, she forced her numb body to move, crawling on her hands and knees toward the street. Everything felt slow and strange, but she made progress. Every few feet, she looked back. The first time, he was still down, convulsing. The second time, he was sitting upright, staring at her. She broke down, crying and shaking, but she kept crawling. I waited for a moment, then asked the question I knew was coming. "Did he come after you again?" "No," she said quietly. He just stared. Then he smiled again, and that's when she screamed for help. "The last time I saw him," Hattie said, her voice barely a whisper. "He wasn't bald anymore. He had long, curly blonde hair, just like mine." She looked down, ashamed. "He ate my hair and stole it from me. In the months that followed, I kept Hutty had moved back to Wisconsin to be with her family. Her physical wounds were healing, but emotionally, she was still fractured. I called her new college's mental health office to check in. The counselor was polite, but cautious, speaking only in general terms. Just as we were wrapping up, though, she let something slip. "It's the strangest thing," she said. "The poor dear, her hair won't grow back." A month and a half later, I missed my usual bus home due to an accident on the line. I could have paid for a taxi, but instead I chose to walk to a farther stop. The neighborhood wasn't particularly dangerous, but it was more rundown abandoned storefronts, overgrown lots, graffiti scattered along walls and fences. As I walked under an overpass bridge near the stop, something caught my eye among the clutter of colorful tags and chaotic scrawls. A single line stood out, stark and ominous, written in dark red letters: "He only eats the best of us." A year ago, I might have laughed, thought it was a lyric or some edgy social commentary. But standing there in the shadow of that bridge, the words hit differently. I immediately thought of Hutty. My pace quickened. When I reached the stop, I glanced back and saw him. A thin, pale man with long, flowing blonde hair. I don't remember if I screamed. I just know I turned back to the street, heart racing, desperate for someone. Anyone. That's when I saw the bus turning the corner a block away. I nearly cried with relief. I ran. The moment the doors opened, I jumped on and found a seat in the middle. The bus was only half full, but I clung to the presence of other people like a drowning swimmer grabs a rope. I felt like prey among the herd-saved, but watched. Was I overreacting? Was it really him, or just my imagination? I checked my phone. My stop was 20 minutes away. I set an alarm for 15, just in case I dozed off, though that seemed impossible, given the adrenaline still coursing through me. I must have fallen asleep anyway, because I woke to a whisper in my ear. "You have lovely eyes." I turned slowly, heart pounding, trying to see who had whispered to me. In the dark reflection of the window, I saw him. The old blonde man was leaning so close, his mouth nearly brushing my ear like a whispering lover. His milky, clouded eyes stared into mine, wide and unblinking, glowing like infected moons above a sickle-shaped smile. He held me in that gaze for a long, agonizing second before rasping the words again. "You have lovely eyes." That broke the spell. I sprang from my seat and bolted to the front of the bus, yelling at the driver, "Let me out! Let me out now, goddammit!" Startled and annoyed, the driver pulled over just as my phone alarm went off. I was barely 2 blocks from home, and I wasn't waiting. I threw off my heels and ran barefoot down the sidewalk, not daring to look behind me. Only when I was safely inside my building, the door locked and deadbolt thrown, did I finally breathe. I crept to the peephole, my chest heaving. Nothing. I checked the Windowsno sign of him. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't even the same man. But even if it was him, Hutty's man, there was no way he'd followed me. Not with how fast I ran. Then came the knock. I froze, every muscle tight. Another knock, softer this time. I crept back to the door and looked through the peephole, again still nothing. Maybe they had the wrong apartment. Maybe they'd left. I waited, unmoving. Then it came again. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm sent chills racing up my spine. Shave and a haircut, 2 bits. I bit my lip and stared out. The hallway was still emptier, looked that way. What if he was just out of view, waiting for me to open the door? I considered calling the police, but what could I tell them? That someone knocked with a creeping rhythm? Instead, I called the building's handyman, George. I told him I thought someone had followed me, and now they were knocking on my door. He sounded half asleep at first, but as soon as he heard the fear in my voice, he promised to come right up. 5 minutes later, another knock, but this time, followed by George's voice. "Miss Castillo? There's no one out here. I'll check the other doors just to be safe. But someone did leave something for you." Confused, I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. "Left something?" George held it up and passed it through the gap. "That's for you, I guess. I think you're okay now, but be careful. There are some bad things out there." He didn't say people. He said things. And though I saw his forced smile, there was something pale and tight behind it that told me he believed it, too. George looked at me once more before saying, "No, I think everything's okay. Just keep your door locked. And let me know if you have any more trouble." Then he was gone. I considered reminding him to check the other floors like he'd said, but something told me he wasn't going to. No, he'd go straight to his own apartment and lock his own door just like I had. When I turned on the lights more closely at the object he'd handed me, my breath caught. Whether it was a warning or a threat, I knew what it truly was, a promise. The very next day, I gave my notice, packed what I could, and moved into an extended stay hotel. 3 weeks later, I drove a moving truck across the country, trying to leave it all behind. The first thing I set down in my new home was the thing I had received that night. I hate seeing it. I hate what it represents. But I need to see it'll remember. It sits on my mantle like a scar carved into my life. A heavy, old, metal spoon, likely pewter. Its bowl is deep and round, but the outer rim has been sharpened to a deadly edge, honed by a whetstone or grinder. It's more blade than spoon now meant for cutting, for digging. I know, without testing it, that it could be used to gouge out an eye. My hands tremble even now, just thinking about it. I turn to the window instead. It isn't dark yet, but the shadows are already swelling. I force myself to keep looking into the fading light, not because I'm brave, not because I'm strong, but because I'm still prey watching the horizon with the trembling hope that, tonight, nothing in the dark is watching back.